Late at night, when the world quiets down and nostalgia hits like a slow-burning fuse, a certain image can flicker to life in your mind. Janis Joplin, wild hair flying, raspy laugh echoing, dressed in a kaleidoscope of fringe and feathers. She leans into the microphone with tinted glasses slipping down her nose, eyes crinkling with mischief. And suddenly, everything else fades. There's something magnetic about her presence, part raw power, part aching vulnerability. You can feel it before she even sings a note, and it makes you wonder, how did this woman, once mocked as a misfit in a conservative Texas town, rise to become the untamed queen of rock and roll, only to vanish at 27, leaving behind a voice that still refuses to die? Janis Joplin was born on January 19th, 1943, in Port Arthur, Texas, a blue-collar port town hugging the Gulf Coast. Her parents, Dorothy and Seth Joplin, were ordinary folks, solidly middle class, respectful of tradition, and hopeful that their children would fit seamlessly into the community's conservative mold. But from the moment Janis opened her mouth to speak, or later to sing, it was obvious she was an anomaly in this industrial corner of the South. There was something about her laugh, loud and unrestrained, and the flash of curiosity in her eyes that suggested she didn't want to stay neatly behind the lines that Port Arthur had drawn for its young ladies. Growing up in a place like Port Arthur as a girl who didn't care about conforming to the local standards of femininity was a challenge. You might picture rows of oil refineries, the smell of gasoline in the air, and a social culture that revolved around football games on Friday nights and churches on Sunday mornings. Janis was no pageant girl, no quiet debutante. She was the type who wore her heart on her sleeve, quick with a witty comeback, and openly critical of the prejudices she saw around her. It made the local crowd uneasy. Her father, Seth, quietly encouraged her intellect. He often gave her books, seeing how her eyes lit up when exploring poetry or reading about faraway places. But the social climate around them was less understanding. Being eccentric in that environment was like painting a target on your back. By her early teens, Janis struggled with multiple insecurities. Her skin was prone to severe acne that left visible scars, a source of deep anxiety in a high school environment where looks and conformity carried enormous weight. She was also a bit heavier set, with a messy tangle of hair that refused to be tamed by typical beauty standards. Kids at school, always on the lookout for differences to poke fun at, zeroed in on her. They hurled awful names: freak, pig, creep. Nobody hearing those words at that age can remain unscathed. Janis, soft-hearted but outwardly brash, developed a thick defensive shell of sarcasm and boisterous laughter. She'd crack jokes and shrug it off publicly, but inside those insults cut deep, sowing seeds of self-doubt that would follow her for the rest of her life. This early period shaped her rebelliousness. She wasn't just a misfit on the outside. She was also an outspoken supporter of civil rights, often defending the local black community in a fiercely segregated region. In a deeply conservative southern town of the 1950s, siding with racial equality was a radical stance for a teenage white girl. She'd sit at local hangouts or in school lunchrooms, talking with black classmates or older acquaintances, praising the music they introduced her to. It was blues that really took hold of her spirit. The raw, unfiltered emotionality of artists like Bessie Smith or Big Mama Thornton spoke directly to Janis's sense of being an outsider, igniting a spark she couldn't ignore. She started confiding in her journals that she wanted to sing, not the sweet polished tunes of pop, but the bluesy howls that felt like they came from the bottom of your soul. Ironically, her earliest formal singing experience came in a church choir. The late 1950s in Port Arthur meant almost everyone attended church services on Sundays. And if you were recognized as having a decent voice, you joined the choir. Janis's voice, powerful even then, turned heads, but she didn't quite fit the mold of a disciplined church singer. She'd belt out hymns with just a hint too much gusto, a little too raw, a little too emotive. Some older members saw it as irreverent. Others said it was simply heartfelt. Either way, she was learning to command her vocal power, discovering how to move people with a single note, a tremor in her breath, a note held just a bit longer than expected. A pivotal shift came when she graduated high school and decided to attend college. In the early 1960s, she was accepted into the University of Texas at Austin, a much more cosmopolitan environment than Port Arthur. She might have hoped to find acceptance, a circle that valued her offbeat style. But life at UT Austin wasn't all smooth sailing. Her appearance still garnered stares. She wore bohemian clothes, let her hair run wild, spoke her mind about politics and social issues. Many students found her intriguing. Some admired her unconventional spirit, while others were more malicious. The cruelest incident was when a group of fraternity guys at UT staged a mock competition naming her the ugliest man on campus. They plastered it around the campus as if it were a joke. Imagine the humiliation. Janis, already self-conscious, forced to confront a public smear campaign that turned her into a living punchline. She tried to laugh it off. Her brand of humor was defensive and biting. She told friends she didn't care, that these people were idiots. But heartbreak is heartbreak. That brand of cruelty leaves a scar. At the same time, there were glimmers of recognition for her talent. A student journalist wrote a piece calling her someone who dares to be different, praising her for ignoring the rules and forging her own path. It was one of the first positive validations she'd received from the outside world, and it reminded her that maybe she was on the right track, or at least a track that led somewhere beyond small-minded opinions. She started playing small gigs in Austin bars, belting out folk and blues tunes, leaving audiences breathless. Yet the endless teasing and social ostracism weighed heavily. One minute she was euphoric because people cheered her voice. The next she felt lower than ever. Desperate to escape these emotional whiplashes, she drifted deeper into drinking, occasionally experimenting with drugs. Not enough yet to derail her studies completely, but enough to hint at a dangerous pattern that would grow worse. She left UT before finishing a degree, packing her life into a suitcase, and heading west to San Francisco in the mid-1960s. It was the Haight-Ashbury era, a time of communal living, psychedelic music, protests against the Vietnam War, and a radical rethinking of social norms. San Francisco was an oasis for artists and rebels, a far cry from the conservative enclaves of Texas. For Janis, it felt like coming home to a place that welcomed her quirks rather than punishing them. She would roam the district, meeting fellow musicians, living in group houses, busking for change, immersing herself in the city's blossoming counterculture. But new freedom often comes with new dangers. In the Haight scene, illicit substances circulated with an almost casual normalcy. LSD was considered a spiritual tool by some, pot was ubiquitous, and heavier drugs like heroin hovered in the background. For Janis, who already had a fragile sense of self-worth and who found a release in alcohol, the temptation was overwhelming. She partied relentlessly, chasing the euphoria of acceptance. People recognized her as that wild-voiced chick from Texas, and her boisterous presence made her the life of any gathering. But behind the laughter, the bravado, her health was deteriorating quickly. She lost a drastic amount of weight, looked gaunt and exhausted, and her close friends noticed that she was rarely sober. By 1965, it got so bad that friends in San Francisco pooled money to send her back to Texas. She needed to detox, to step away from the city's spiraling party culture before it claimed her life altogether. Returning to Texas felt like a reluctant step backward. She was humiliated to show up in Port Arthur again, scrawny and frail, a living manifestation of all the dire warnings the local crowd had once hissed at her. Still, her family took her in, grateful she was still alive. Janis tried to get clean. She also re-enrolled in school, this time at Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas, studying anthropology. Maybe she thought an academic pursuit could keep her grounded. Nights, though, she couldn't resist the call of music, so she'd slip away to Austin bars, performing small gigs. Each time she felt that stage beneath her feet, the microphone in her hand, the applause warming her heart, it reaffirmed the sense that she was meant to sing, meant to break boundaries, not stay in a classroom reading anthropology texts. She held things together for about a year, mostly staying off the harder stuff. But in 1966, a door opened that she couldn't resist passing through. Chet Helms, an old friend from the San Francisco scene, reached out. He had become a key figure in the local music community and was managing a band called Big Brother and the Holding Company. They needed a lead singer, someone with grit and soul, someone who could stand out in the growing wave of West Coast rock acts. Janis hopped on the next plane to San Francisco, once more leaving Texas in the rear view. This time, she wasn't returning as a lost wanderer. She had a purpose, a band, a chance to transform her raw talent into something unstoppable. Joining Big Brother and the Holding Company was the lightning strike that fused her voice with a new electric dimension. The band specialized in a psychedelic rock style, full of distorted guitars, frenetic drumming, and freeform improvisation. Janis's guttural blues wail collided with that energy, creating an explosive synergy. At small venues in the Bay Area, crowds went ballistic for her. She didn't just sing, she channeled every heartbreak, every insecurity, and every ounce of longing into her performance. She'd stomp across the stage, fling her hair around, and close her eyes, as if exorcising personal demons. The press quickly took notice. Her photos started circulating, capturing the mania in her expression and the bohemian flamboyance of her clothes. The pinnacle of this early success came at the 1967 Monterey Pop Festival, arguably one of the first large-scale rock festivals that defined the era. Big Brother and the Holding Company took the stage, overshadowed on the bill by more established names, until Janis opened her mouth. The band launched into Ball and Chain, and that was it. One of those transcendent moments in rock history. The crowd was stunned by the force of her voice, the unbridled passion that made every lyric sound like life or death. Mama Cass Elliot, sitting in the audience, famously mouthed, "Wow." That performance was Janis's breakout, leading record executives, journalists, and a national audience to realize they were witnessing a star who could reshape the possibilities of female rock vocals. She was fearless, raw, and heartbreakingly relatable. But success is a double-edged sword. Gaining fame meant bigger gigs, travel, interviews, an unrelenting schedule, and, lurking behind it all, temptations for a woman with a precarious handle on addiction. By 1968, Janis parted ways with Big Brother to pursue a solo career, fronting the Cosmic Blues Band first, then the Full Tilt Boogie Band. Some say she left the band at the urging of music industry insiders who felt Big Brother wasn't up to her caliber. Others believe Janis's ambition demanded a new style, more refined and less chaotic, to showcase her voice. Either way, she moved into a new phase of her career, adopting a flashier wardrobe, colorful feather bows, flamboyant sunglasses, loads of jewelry, and an even more intense stage persona. She'd open a concert swigging from a bottle of Southern Comfort, crack jokes with the crowd in a raspy drawl, and then unleash a scorching set that left fans exhilarated and emotionally drained. Yet the old insecurities festered. Off stage, she sometimes confessed to friends how lonely she felt. She'd be the life of a party, but at 3 a.m., back in a hotel room, the silence was deafening. Past rejections, body image issues, and the heartbreak of broken relationships plagued her. She found fleeting solace in booze, in casual flings, in heroin. The latter slowly tightened its grip as the pressure escalated, though she tried in vain to quit multiple times. Meanwhile, critics raved about her voice, praising the whiskey-soaked timbre. But the constant partying was exacting a physical toll. She was always either on top of the world or sinking into despair with no middle ground. Sometime around late 1969 into 1970, Janis resolved to get a handle on her life. She'd talk about wanting to settle down, maybe adopt a child, find a stable partnership. She recorded the album I Got Dem Ol' Cosmic Blues Again Mama, but it received mixed reviews. While she personally admired the horn-based style and raw soul influences, it didn't entirely capture the synergy that fans craved from her. Undeterred, she moved forward, assembling the Full Tilt Boogie Band, arguably her tightest group of collaborators. They clicked on a personal and musical level, setting the stage for what became her final and most iconic album, Pearl. The creation of Pearl, in the late summer and early fall of 1970, was a critical point for Janis. On one hand, the sessions revealed her at her best, sober enough to deliver mind-blowing vocal takes, passionate about the new songs, thrilled at the synergy with her band. Tracks like Me and Bobby McGee showed an evolving artistry, adding a tenderness and depth beyond her earlier work. Everyone around her felt that the album could be her magnum opus, the record that showed the world she was more than just a wild child with a big voice. She was also a performer capable of profound emotional range, but behind the scenes the old demon still lurked. She struggled with heroin. Some days she'd show up to the studio vibrant and joking. Other days she'd be late or absent altogether. Producer Paul Rothchild, famous for his work with The Doors, tried to support her, but he knew the problem was bigger than anything a colleague could solve. In early October 1970, Janis was holed up in LA's Landmark Motor Hotel, finishing the final touches on Pearl and living the chaotic existence of an artist on the edge. She was partying again, drifting away from her recently regained sobriety, though no one realized how dire it had become. On October 4th, 1970, she didn't show up for a scheduled recording session. People tried calling her room, no answer. Eventually, her road manager, John Cook, went to check on her. He found Janis on the floor beside her bed, already gone. The official cause of death was a heroin overdose. Word spread quickly. Another bright light of the rock world snuffed out at 27, just weeks after Jimi Hendrix had passed, also at 27. The heartbreak was immense. Fans were stunned. Janis had seemed so alive, so unstoppable. And yet, that lethal dose of heroin, rumored to be unusually pure, had put a cruel end to her rocket ride. The aftermath felt surreal. She joined the ranks of what later became known as the 27 Club, a phrase coined to encompass the tragic fact that Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and soon Jim Morrison, in 1971, all died at the same age. Their stories encapsulated the era's spirit, rebellious, countercultural, and brimming with both creative genius and self-destructive impulses. Newspapers around the world eulogized Janis, praising her unique brand of rock blues fusion. Interviews with her friends, producers, and bandmates revealed the heartbreak of seeing her so close to delivering her greatest masterpiece, only to vanish at the threshold. Her funeral was a subdued affair, quite at odds with her flamboyant public image. Only her parents and an aunt reportedly attended a small private memorial. This was partly out of respect for Janis's own wishes. She didn't want a big, weepy ceremony. She left behind instructions that her remains were to be cremated. Her ashes were scattered off the coast at Stinson Beach near San Francisco, letting the Pacific winds carry her spirit back into the infinite. The image is poetic. Janis, whose voice once roamed the airwaves, now truly mingling with the breeze and the salt of the ocean. Some say you can still sense her echo in the gull cries at dusk, a faint wail that belongs to the soul of an artist who gave everything she had. One detail that underscores her irreverent sense of humor and generosity is in her will. She set aside a sum of money for a gathering, a final party for her closest friends to celebrate rather than mourn. That posthumous bash reportedly featured Southern Comfort, her drink of choice, loud rock music, and a mix of tears and laughter. People recounted stories of Janis's unstoppable wit, her unfiltered affection for those she trusted, and her mania for living in the moment. It was a last reminder that even in death she wanted a swirl of color and sound, not a hushed and dismal funeral. It was as though she was saying, "Remember me with a drink in your hand and a wild grin on your face." In the decades since, her posthumous album Pearl was released, including hits like Me and Bobby McGee and the haunting a cappella track Mercedes-Benz, recorded just days before her death. The album soared to the top of the charts, a testament to the unfulfilled promise that was Janis Joplin. Listeners even now find themselves enthralled by the raw vulnerability in her voice. She didn't conceal her pain. She channeled it into crescendos that seemed capable of cutting through steel. Contemporary female rock and pop vocalists, everyone from Stevie Nicks to Pink, have cited Janis's fearless style as an inspiration, a blueprint for how to stand on stage and pour your soul into every note. So the next time you find yourself scrolling through YouTube late at night, searching for something real, pop in a performance by Janis Joplin. Maybe that Monterey pop footage or the Festival Express clips. Watch how her body moves like a conduit for the music, how her voice cracks at the edges but hits you straight in the soul. Let it remind you that behind all the iconic images, all the stories of heartbreak and addiction, there was a woman who tried to find love, both from the crowds and from within herself, and who left behind a legacy of unapologetic truth. In a world that often prefers polished veneers, her unfiltered wail is a reminder that some hearts beat too fiercely to be contained for very long. Hers certainly did, and that beat still echoes in every note she sang, every photograph capturing her unguarded grin, and every story told by friends who saw her burn, bright, if only for a short while. Then, like a comet, she was gone, into the wind at Stinson Beach, where the sea and sky carry her voice forever.